Please welcome Amazon Web Services Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer, Steve Schmidt.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to AWS Reinforce. This is our first inaugural conference. And since I said first, you probably get a hint that there'll be another one. We'll talk a little bit later about when that's going to be and where. We're going to talk today about a broad overview about security in AWS, security of the cloud, security in the cloud, how we can help you build securely, the kinds of things that you should expect to see from us in the future. We're going to take a look at our culture of security. I think one of the most important things we can do as a security industry is build in the right behavior profiles for our staff. And that means building behavior in both the security engineering teams, but also in the development teams that we support to help them understand that security is an integral part of everything we do every single day. We'll, of course, talk about some new tools, some new features that we have to offer, the new things that are coming out this year. We're going to have a couple customers join us on stage. They're going to give us some insights into their migration paths, as well as some of the lessons that they learned as they moved from an on-premises environment into the cloud. We're going to go deep on a few technical things that I think are important for people to know, things they should be focusing on, some tips that may help you move yourself forward more rapidly. And then we're going to finish up with a roadmap and some hints and predictions of where we think our industry is going and where the technology is going as well. So the state of security, we'd love to be able to say, hey, everything is awesome and strong, thanks very much, have a nice conference. But that really isn't where reality is in the world here. We are in a position of strength as an industry. Customers regularly tell us that they are better off operating in the cloud than they are in their own data centers on premises. And that is not only from an availability perspective, but often from a security perspective as well. We've got more than 2 million customers doing billions and billions of transactions every single day. Are we perfect? Of course not. But I really object to the sky is falling mantra that some security vendors put out there. That is just simply not the case. It is not true, and it's not good for us as an industry. We want this conference, Reinforce, to be about taking you from that 95% point to 100% of where you want to be in security. This is about learning, about how to do things, how to succeed. And it's an area that I think will be able to give you practical materials that help you build the security environment that you want for your business or your industry. I want you, every single one of you, to walk away with at least 3, maybe 5 things that help you make yourself more secure every single day that you operate and more secure than you were yesterday. Interesting thing is, most of the services and features that we'll talk about from AWS aren't even revenue drivers. These are just trust and success factors that we think are important to helping you succeed in your business. So was Thoreau the original cloud evangelist in this case? Maybe, maybe not. We'll talk about some foundational aspects of security in the cloud, along with the current state and some philosophical discussions about where we think the AWS cloud can be a business differentiator for you and your organization. There is always a tension between data sovereignty and resiliency. You need resiliency, but you have to balance your activities with rules that are imposed on your industry. Are you subject to GDPR, for example, or do you need data residency in a particular country, and that sort of thing. By the way, that is particularly relevant to this conference. When we were looking at the registration materials, we found that there are more than 50 countries represented in the conference here today, which I think is awesome. It really gives you an idea of how global this business really is. The Delaware North quote that's on the screen there indicates that we have a really good story about resiliency, and that's super important to the thousands of regulated customers we have who cannot tolerate downtime of any kind. What I think is also really important, though, is your resiliency plans must include the ability to be resilient within a particular country or within a particular region. No discussion about security is complete without a discussion about availability. And I think they're really, really intertwined. People often try and separate them and look at them as two problems, but they are often the same thing. So how does the physical world that we live in and we operate in affect cloud services and cloud security? Well, I'll be happy to tell you, of course. I present you with the concept of a building. They've been around for a very long time. We're all familiar with how they're constructed. We live in one. But in my world, a data center is a building. And it's something that I think we do a very good job with. We are good at constructing our facilities. We know how to operate them well, et cetera. But herein lies a problem. Buildings can fail. It happens all the time. Lightning strikes, tornadoes happen, earthquakes, blizzards, and so on. And one point of presence in the physical world is a statistic waiting to occur. So what do you want to do instead? What you want is many buildings composed into a campus spread across an entire region. The point here is statistical diversity, physical diversity, and the ability to build applications which meet your particular requirements for availability. Now, we don't like it when anybody has a bad day in the cloud, including our competitors. However, this quote illustrates a point of differentiation: availability zones. A building versus a campus. Here's a case where a single building, which a provider who's unnamed may call a region, was not robust enough. A lightning strike happened, the building went offline, and in this particular scenario, the way it played out was that provider lost all of their services in that region. Compare that to our concept of availability zones. We don't set up a single building, call it a region. We want maximum robustness in our designs. To that end, our infrastructure is composed of 64 availability zones within 21 geographic regions around the world right now. We've also announced plans for 12 more availability zones and 4 more AWS regions: Bahrain, Cape Town, Jakarta, and Milan. Our AZs provide you with the data center redundancy and availability that you need to run your business, and they're all interconnected with over 2.6 million miles of network that we operate. Unlike other cloud infrastructure providers, for us, a region always has multiple availability zones, and availability zones have multiple physical data centers associated with them. By comparison, some cloud providers claim to have over 50 regions, but when you really look into it, each region has no AZs at all, just one single data center. So it's really not comparable to call what they call a region anything near what AWS understands a region to be and our customers expect. So in one of our regions, we should drill down further. Each AZ is isolated both by distance, by power systems, by separate networking paths, et cetera. And that gives the customers the ability to operate production applications or databases in a fault-tolerant and scalable fashion that's not possible using a single AZ. All of the AZs, by the way, are interconnected with the network that we operate. It's a high bandwidth, low latency interconnect over dedicated metro fiber. If you've ever had a chance to look at some of the talks that Peter DeSantis gives at reInvent, there's a really fascinating dig into the way we build the network between these facilities and how some of them have thousands and thousands of fiber cables interconnecting them rather than depending on dense wave division multiplexing because of the failure modes that are associated with it. Okay. We're going to do something now that's going to make the guys who run the networking infrastructure in here really upset at me because they weren't expecting this. We're going to do a thought experiment, group participation. There are about 5,000 people in this room here. There's another 5,000 or 7,000 people watching on the live stream right now. Take out your phone and search how many availability zones does a provider of your choice have. Choose whatever provider you want and look at the results. You'll probably be directed to a discussion about regions instead of AZs, or what an AZ is, as opposed to how many a certain CSP has. Ask yourself, why don't they answer transparently? Maybe it's because the answer could actually be 7 or 4. It's really hard to tell. And this is reflected in service availability. Service downtime is a big deal, a big component of security. It's a part of availability. And interestingly, even though we have many, many more AZs and more regions than the number 2 provider does, they have had 5.7 times the downtime we have over the last 24 months. Our customers are very clear about what they want and what they need. Always on, always available, always secure. And that is our value proposition for our customers. For us, it continues to be about customer focus. Amazonians have learned from the day that they got into the company that we really value the customer input process, but more importantly, we always look for ways to improve the way our customers are using our services and the way they're experiencing our customer service. We've reduced prices 73 times since AWS launched in 2006. An example of a recent price reduction that's relevant to the security community, for example, is a service like AWS Config Rules, where we provide 84 managed rules that customers can use to write custom Lambda functions to take actions when there's an event that they're concerned about. As of August 1st, config rule prices have changed to a pay-per-use model. Our customers are charged by the number of evaluations that they run each month. And when this goes live, we expect customers to nearly halve, 50% cut, the costs that they have associated with config rules. Innovation is a wonderful part of this business. It's one of the reasons I love working here. I'm a builder at heart, and it's something that I really, really enjoy. And we continue to iterate at a faster clip than anybody else out there. We don't often talk about the many, many capabilities that we're adding to our services or features. It's kind of ridiculous because it's about 5 a day at this point. Interesting thing for my team is that we have to do an application security review for every single service that's launched and every single feature. So it is this marathon of sprints, if that's a possibility, that we have to put together to keep up with our service teams. So let's talk a lot about how cloud provider X, and you can fill in the X there with some other folks' names, define compliance programs. How do they define it? Is it something to comply with a particular law, some recommendations, some casual advice, that kind of thing? What's happening in reality is there are a lot of providers out there who take everything they can think of, throw it in a pile, and call it a compliance program. Does that really help you stay secure? Maybe, maybe not. We have a little bit of a different view. We've got about 210 security, compliance, and governance features and services that we've launched, which is about 40 times the number that the number 2 CSP has. More importantly, though, we've driven encryption into 117 different AWS services, which is 3 times as many as any other cloud provider out there. We're always adding new capabilities. For example, new components in infrastructure security, new encryption capabilities, better and more fine-grained IAM controls, or standalone security services like GuardDuty, which is built by my own team. The important thing here is the bad guys are always improving the way they're doing their business. We have to be constantly improving as a security industry as well. So we'll always be adding new features or new capabilities to help us keep up and, in fact, get better than the bad guys in many circumstances. As we always bring you new building blocks, we also focus on where we think we need to be in the future. If you look at the stats on the screen here, it's kind of an interesting / scary point. When you think about IoT, it's an area that we really need to focus as an industry there. IoT traffic's increased 150 times recently. And an interesting comparison is if you look at the internet traffic as a whole, around 94% of what we see on the internet is encrypted with TLS. Nice job, people. That's awesome. We love seeing it. The difficulty is that about 90% of the traffic coming from IoT devices is plain text, HTTP, which is a giant fail as far as I'm concerned across the industry. It's one of the reasons that we built AWS IoT Defender. I think every IoT solution should start and end with security here. IoT Defender, of course, helps you identify your devices, authorize them onto your infrastructure and your services, add encryption, access control, et cetera. But most importantly, IoT Defender also gives you a way to patch and update your devices. And that's something that many developers never thought about when they deployed these small, low-power devices out into the field. You must be able to update them with new software, with new firmware in a reliable fashion because there are bugs in code that have to be fixed. IoT is not only in the ground, it's also in the sky. So we built AWS Ground Station to help people manage and control satellite systems, downlink and process their data, and scale their operations across the internet as well. Ground Station, of course, was built with our security and identity infrastructure in place so that the customers who've never had an access control policy process like AWS IAM before can apply that to satellite operations as well. It's a real differentiator for them. As we continue to look into security, of course, we've got additional services that my team vends, like GuardDuty, which helps you secure your infrastructure, Security Hub, which helps you understand how you're using your infrastructure, prioritize your alerts and your compliance status, Inspector, which helps you look at your applications and your operating systems on all of your machines, and Macy, which helps you discover and categorize the data that you have, but more importantly, understand how your humans are accessing that data. There are a few sessions I want to point out about foundational security, and the tracks are broken out, and I'll talk a little bit more about them later. The leadership session today at 3:15 is being led by Senior Principal Engineer Don Beetle Bailey and Corey Quinn from last week in AWS. They're going to talk about some best practices, some features and security updates that you may have missed, and it's an awesome opportunity to get brought up to date. So now that we've taken a quick look at our services, I'd like to bring on stage Principal Technologist Abby Fuller to give you some insights into our security culture.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Fuller, and I am a Principal Technologist here with AWS. And I'm here today to talk a little bit about how we build a culture of security here. So I have a quote here from Lemony Snicket, who I think wrote a series of unfortunate events books. And I'm not sure whether that's really a good omen or not here. But it says, nobody wants to fall into a safety net. However, it beats the alternative. And I think that for a lot of us, the processes and culture around security, that is the safety net. So day to day, with regard to security, we think about it all the time, right? Internal teams, external teams, we all do this the same way. We work backwards from the customers. And we have to think about it at every single piece of the day, right? And there's no one, definitely not in this audience, thinking, I don't need to be secure. So we have a lot of customer meetings, we talk to a lot of folks, we ask questions. And you'll often hear us say, and if you haven't heard it before, you'll definitely hear it today, that security is job 0. Security is job 1. And however you say it, it means the same thing, that we take security extremely seriously throughout AWS, from our dev pipelines to our operations runbook. And at the root of that, teams all follow the same processes. We communicate, we escalate, we sanity check, we build safety nets. And security comes about as an extension of all of that. We will delay products and features to address security. It is sacrosanct. And one of the first parts of that, one of the foundational aspect of security here, is the principle of least privilege. And that means giving everything, a role, a service, a person, the least amount of access that they need to do their job. And this means getting humans away from the data. Because if they don't need it to do their job, the more access that you have, the more it introduces a huge amount of risk into any business if your access levels aren't dialed in. So we have a group internally that monitors critical permissions 24/7. We don't share access between service teams. There is no blanket here. Take a look at everything. Permissions level. This is about giving developers and operators the ability to do their job, but not the ability to have access to encryption keys, intellectual property, personally identifiable information, or any of the other sensitive items that are at the core of your systems. And one of the things that we hold near and dear here are service level agreements, or SLAs. And the goal of these is to hold people accountable when things go wrong, because it is practically impossible, or really not at all possible, to design a system that will never fail. And even if that were possible, attempting to achieve perfection is not cost or time effective. It is better to define the desired reliability for each system or its components in terms of the percentage of the time that it is working properly available. So for example, an SLA of 99.99, often called 4 nines, would mean that the service is only down approximately 4.3 minutes a month. So you have standards in place, Now what? You get to automate, and you get to template things out. So you want them to be repeatable and portable. And that might mean building directly from repositories. It might mean making it part of your CI/CD process. You want to automate with CloudFormation or with something else that does resource management. But repeatable doesn't mean just installing packages and putting your application in a pipeline and then calling it good. You have to test and observe and debug as well. And that's how you know that your templates and your applications are working. You have to watch them, and you have to understand your system. So we see more and more people not only logging for postmortems, but to understand, hey, what's happening in my application and why? And is that okay? And part of a culture of security is the flexibility to adapt. As our workloads change, as the way that our customers build their applications change, we have to change too. And as more and more of our customers have started to adopt containers and serverless, we've grown along with them. And that means how we think about security too. So if I'm running Fargate or if I'm running Lambda, I don't manage EC2 instances anymore. And those instances themselves, that could have been what led to a security vulnerability. So we all know that we have differing levels of users out there with different concepts of security standards. So how do we go about starting them in a secure space right from the jump in an environment where we can handle the patching and updating for them? So with Fargate or with Lambda, you focus on building secure applications, and we'll give you the tools to help you build that successfully. But for the instances themselves, we patch them and we update them for you. But speaking of the instances, we still want to innovate constantly on behalf of our customers. And that starts with Nitro, which is focused on great isolations and security. So the Nitro controller is really in charge of that whole system. The Intel processor mainboard is really an untrusted peripheral that is used to run computer workloads. The Nitro controller first boots from a local, totally private storage device, then orchestrates the boot of other Nitro computers as well as the mainboard. It first validates all the firmware on the mainboard to ensure nothing has been modified from a previously installed golden image. Then, in the hypervised case, injects a fully validated hypervisor directly from the Nitro controller, or in the bare metal case, allows the mainboard to be booted from an emulated local NVM device, emulated by another Nitro computer that is actually a remote EBS volume. And once that system is operational, Nitro computers offload and accelerate all I/O, VPC access, EBS volumes, and instant storage volumes. Encryption keys for I/O are provisioned by and cached on the Nitro computers and are inaccessible from the system mainboard. The mainboard has no direct access to the trusted EC2 network. All network access is 100% mediated by the Nitro system. It is impossible for software on the mainboard to reach any network other than the VPCs that have been associated with that host. And finally, with no domain zero, or DOM zero, needed or present on either the system mainboard or any of the Nitro computers, that means there's no interactive mode of access, like SSH, and thus zero human access to these hosts while operational. All interaction with the system is via authenticated, authorized, and logged API calls. And we want to keep innovating with Nitro as well. So there's Nitro with Firecracker. And as we shift towards these containers and serverless workloads, we saw an opportunity to build virtualization technology that would be able to support these workloads efficiently. And that means that we need to have both the security and agility that our customers have come to expect from VMs on EC2, and the flexibility and performance of things like containers. So you have to balance for both of those, both security and performance. And until Firecracker, you had to choose between containers with fast startup times and high density, or VMs with strong hardware virtualization-based security and workload isolation. In other words, you have to choose between security and performance. We will all in this room always choose security. And with Firecracker, you don't have to. So Firecracker allows you to deploy workloads in lightweight virtual machines called micro VMs, which provide enhanced security and workload isolation, while enabling the speed and resource efficiency of containers. So really minimalist design. It excludes unnecessary devices and guest functionality to reduce the memory footprint and attack surface of each micro VM. But the bottom line here is that no matter how you're running your workloads, we want to put security first. And that leads me to where I think this space is going, and I think where it gets interesting is something like AWS App Mesh. So I can have many different kinds of compute inside a mesh, right? I can have an application running on EC2. I can have a container running with ECS or EKS. I can have Kubernetes on EC2. In the fullness of time, I'd love to see something like Lambda functions inside of App Mesh. And where where that gets interesting is because I can mix and match, I can drain traffic off from one type to the other, lets me experiment a little bit more. But what's really interesting is that security-wise, I can enforce policies and configuration at the mesh level. I can pass @mesh a config, and I can have that enforced throughout the mesh. Plus, something that I think is really important to us here at AWS is security by default. So with @mesh, I opt in to things talking to each other. I opt in to different resources and applications talking to each other. And I think you see that throughout AWS, right? With a security group, with a role. I'm always opting in to access. I'm never opting out. So it doesn't start off being able to talk to everything. I have to tell it explicitly what to do. And I think that that's kind of what the AWS way of security is all about. So how can we help customers build whatever they want, but to help them be secure, reliable, and scalable? But I don't want you to have to do this all yourself. So ultimately, like every other AWS event, Reinforce is a learning conference. We want you to walk away having found out about a tool or a feature or a service that helps you be more secure. And you can lean on tools to both check your infrastructure and applications or container images for vulnerabilities, but also to help you store data securely. We've placed a heavy emphasis on encryption over the past 5 years. So you've probably seen Werner say at one of the reInvent keynotes, encrypt like everyone's watching. And this is about having multiple fail-safes for security. There's no silver bullet, but there is a way to architect so that one problem doesn't sink you. And if you have an overly permissive environment, it could be encryption that really saves you in the end. And I think that's more appropriate for today, maybe. There's another phrase that comes up really often in these keynotes from us. And it says, security is everyone's job. And that's you. And hopefully, over the next 2 days, not only will security still be your job, but we'll find a way to make it just a little bit easier for you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Abby. This is a learning conference like all AWS events, and we want you to walk away having found a tool or a feature or a service that makes you more secure. And you shouldn't have to manage all that learning and work yourself. We've had a really heavy emphasis on encryption over the last 5 years. In fact, if you've ever watched Werner Vogel's in his keynotes, he'll often wear a t-shirt that says, encrypt everything. I think that's a great mantra to have, and it's something that all of us should be thinking about in the design and development process. However, encryption is, of course, no silver bullet. It is one of the ways to build layered security that helps you recover from failures, because all software is written by humans, more or less, and all software, therefore, has bugs in it. So building layered defenses is super important. The other thing I think is really important that we focus on is security is everyone's job. It is not just the job of the security professionals who are in this room today, but every developer who's out there. We want to make sure that you've got the right way to do business, but we also want to help you build the muscle memory within your organizations and your companies to build properly, to build securely, et cetera. Because really being safe and secure in the cloud would be really easy if you didn't have to do anything with your business, if you didn't have to have any customer data or credit cards, if you never had any employees interacting with systems or networks. You would be so easy to get this right, but that's not the reality. And that's realistically not what ships are for, especially not the ships that we operate. No discussion about security would be complete without our partners, and our partners are present in our marketplace. We've got about 230,000 active customers using software in 39 categories across 4,800 listings from 1,400 ISVs. We're really delighted to announce a new public stat we're externalizing for the first time today, that we have over 100,000 subscriptions for security products in the AWS marketplace, and that's 10% of all of the subscriptions are in the security category, which I think is really cool. It's a testament to the fact that the process works, and you folks are interested in it as well. Some of the top vendors in that category were kind enough to help us sponsor our conference today. We'd like to appreciate the work done by McAfee, Palo Alto, and Rapid7 for helping us bring the conference to you today. So how does Marketplace work? It's actually really, really simple. A customer finds the vendors and the products that they're interested in, that they're approved for if they've got guardrails in place in their company. They choose the contract and the pricing terms for a particular project, and then you launch resources and the deployment model and the vendor-specific deployments, whether it's a machine image, for example, or a container, or a software as a service. It really couldn't be easier, but most importantly, it makes it super simple to try out new things without going through a heavyweight sales process. Today, we're happy to announce that procurement system integration, which is a new feature in Marketplace that allows you to integrate with leading procurement system authors using CXML, which is quite a mouthful. We're pleased to announce the first integration is with Coupa, a leader in business spend management. So if you're using Coupa, it integrates with Marketplace today. Support for additional vendors will be coming out soon as well. The reason we're doing this is we want to make it super easy for builders to find, buy, and deploy software that they need from over 4,800 listings across the marketplace. So a lot of security software is traditionally focused on alerting you to something, saying, oh goodness, something is wrong. But what we all really want is remediation. We want an action to take place when the alert is brought up to us. Automation is the most critical piece of this whole puzzle. I've said this again and again and again. If you're waiting for a human being to notice something, to respond to a security incident, you are too late, which means you must use automation in order to succeed in this space. It's important because of speed, but it's also important because of talent management. There are not enough security engineers in the world right now, and we're falling further and further behind. So automation is an area where you must put some effort. Using a bunch of our services together, or alerting from a partner, for example, or AWS config, you can use things like AWS Lambda to cause remediation actions to occur. We're happy to announce that AWS config now includes remediation capabilities with config rules. You can associate a particular rule and a remediation, put them together, and an action will occur automatically when the rule fires. For an example, you could say you want to check that all S3 buckets do not allow public read access. And if they do, Lambda will automatically execute a remediation to close that particular issue for you. A frequent ask we've run into time and time again is, please help us encrypt our Elastic Block Store volumes. That is done and done. All newly created volumes can be encrypted, either using a default key or your own key. You can set up an IAM policy which enforces the use of encryption. And a security team, for example, can enable encryption on all new EBS volumes without any action or code changes by the development teams. This is free, by the way, people. It's something that we just need to do. I'm happiest when the disks that are in our data centers, all they contain is ciphertext. So please take advantage of these opportunities. Previously, by the way, one of the biggest objections that people had to using encryption on storage platforms was it was too hard to implement and it degrades performance. EBS encryption delivers the specified throughput that you select in terms of number of IOPS, and the performance and latency is exactly the same as an unencrypted volume. And again, this is at no extra charge. One specific implementation note that you should be careful of, by the way, is that because keys for crypto and EC2 settings are regional, be sure to opt in on a region-by-region basis to make sure you get coverage across your infrastructure. Next up, I want to highlight the fact that AWS config has added support for API gateway in all AWS regions and GovCloud. You can now track changes to the configuration of an API gateway stage, such as cache cluster settings, or throttle settings, or access log settings. You can also track changes to the configuration of the API itself, such as endpoint configurations, versions, protocols, that sort of thing. And config maintains a history of this over time, which is really important to proving to auditors and to proving to your security team how your infrastructure has been designed and implemented over time. Since we launched this, we've recorded about 800,000 configuration changes for API gateway resources from about 31,000 accounts. On average, we see about 20,000 configuration changes per day related to API gateway resources across all regions. As of this week, you can now use AWS organizations to centrally manage multiple accounts to scale your AWS workloads. With organizations, security admins can use service control policies to establish permission guardrails that all IAM users and roles in the accounts must adhere to. So whether you're just getting started with service control policies or have existing ones, you can now use AWS Identity and Access Management Access Advisor to figure out where you should be limiting access because it's unnecessary or not needed. And remember, one of the most fundamental components of all access control is limitation of blast radius, finding ways to shrink that and ensure you're not exposing more surface area than you absolutely must to. We've talked quite a bit about crypto. Crypto is the thing that's near and dear to me here, but it's really important to keep emphasizing it here. Crypto should be at every layer of your design and your stack because it gives you layers of defense should something else fail. We offer solutions at every layer. Most of them are free. Take advantage of them. For example, at the application layer, you can use our cryptographic SDK. At the transport layer, there are a lot of TLS options available, whether it's through CloudFront or Application Load Balancer. We even have our own TLS implementation in S2N if you're tired of using OpenSSL. At the network layer, we offer VPC encryption, cross-region peering, and of course our VPN services. At the data link layer, most people don't realize that we use MACsec by the way, that's 802.1 AE, to encrypt all of the connectivity between our data centers. So whenever anything leaves our physical control, our walls, we encrypt it on the data link layer and the physical layer as well, so you don't even have to think about that. Finally, today I'd like to announce the general availability of AWS Control Tower. Control Tower is meant to assist you in setting up and governing multi-account AWS environments. In addition to multi-account setup, by the way, Control Tower provides prescriptive guidance for customers on how to establish a landing zone, how to create workflows to provision compliant accounts. It integrates with IAM, our Identity and Access Management platform, and offers pre-configured architectures for network design, cross-account logging, and audit control. Most importantly, workloads which are deployed in landing zones are continuously governed by guardrails, which are prepackaged governance rules that you can select and apply enterprise-wide or just to a few accounts. This has been a feature request that a lot of customers have been asking for a long time. We're really happy that we've got it available to you today. Speaking of governance, it's always top of mind for folks. A few highlights from our governance, risk, and compliance track. This is a great place for everyone in the regulated spaces to get more knowledge about the space and the way we can help you meet and often exceed some really complicated compliance controls around the security of your systems. And to talk more about operated in a very regulated industry, please welcome Brian Riley, Senior Director of Global Cyber Risk Management at Liberty Mutual.
Thank you, Steve, and it is an honor to represent Liberty Mutual here in this rather terrifying room. At Liberty, we believe progress happens when people feel secure. That goes to the core of who we are as an insurance company and underscores the promise we make to our customers to deliver protection from the unexpected, delivered with care. This same belief motivates our global cybersecurity community. We know our company needs to innovate, and we know that cloud environments like AWS are the laboratory in which that innovation will occur. This morning, I'd like to share with you a personal story about what I've learned as a security professional as we've migrated to AWS at scale, to help us provide our business the confidence that, yes, we can make progress. But first, I want to take a moment and welcome all of you to Liberty Mutual's hometown. We started a few blocks from here in 1912, and in the 107 years that have followed, we've grown into a global enterprise with 50,000 employees spread across 30 countries. That includes a global team of over 5,000 technology professionals, managing a diverse set of technologies from legacy systems to modern cutting-edge architectures. We also have a large and growing presence in AWS, among other cloud environments. Mirroring our global footprint, we've deployed thousands of instances in over a dozen regions around the world. Today, that makes up 25% of our technology footprint, and we have plans to grow that presence substantially. And Liberty Mutual grew to this scale in AWS while our IT organization itself was undergoing a transition, adopting agile development practices and a DevOps mindset. Today, 90% of our teams work using agile processes, including our security teams. And optimizing developer experience is among our principal objectives. Now, with this pace of change, it can be a challenge to adapt our security practices to support this scale. Classically, as a security professional, I might have approached this challenge by writing policies and standards and mandating handoffs. Though internally, I've often joked that those security requirements and standards, many of which I wrote myself over the years, can seem to be Word documents no one reads on a SharePoint site no one can find. I think I might have touched a nerve there. Of course, I don't need to tell a room full of security professionals that that's a joke. Setting clear expectations of how we manage risk and clear guidance for what our developers need to do is the lifeblood of a security organization, and we will always continue to produce that. We've learned, though, that that's not enough. We need to do better as a security team. The transition to automated deployments removes some of the handoffs that would make those processes successful in the past, and the transition to infrastructure as code is a challenge, but also a huge opportunity for security teams, offering repeatable builds and actual consistency between environments. But if security is code, and if infrastructure is code, security needs to be code too. It became clear to us that we needed to adapt and have our security team get closer to developers. And this is something we had to learn the hard way through repeated, tough conversations with teams across the organization. And I'm sure many of you have had those same discussions yourself. And it goes without saying, any policy, any written policy, is going to struggle to keep pace with the rate at which AWS releases new services. There's no decision we can make today that a year from now will still be the right decision because the cloud is changing so fast. All of us need to keep an open mind and an eagerness to learn. So we formed a close partnership with our secure DevOps team, giving us a trusted partner with close connections to our application developers, and set out to use the cloud to secure the cloud. And one result of that is a product that we call Radar. Radar is a framework for enforcing cloud security standards at a global scale. Routing CloudWatch events through this framework, we can review changes across our global environment for consistency with our policies, leveraging CloudWatch rules. I'll give a deliberately simple example of this to help illustrate the concept, and then go a bit deeper in a moment. Assume, for the sake of argument, someone tries to deploy infrastructure that is not consistent with our requirements, that everything is encrypted in AWS in transit and at rest. The CloudWatch event generated when that S3 bucket is created is routed through the rules engine. Radar will detect the inconsistency and, through automation, turn encryption on. If someone attempts to remove encryption from existing storage, the same thing follows. We'll turn it right back on. And in all cases, the logs generated by that are recorded so we can provide guidance to our developers on why their deployment failed. The result of this is leveraging the cloud to secure the cloud, building a flexible set of guardrails that allow agile teams to experiment while enforcing that our standards are met. To give a couple of examples of classes of practices that we can enforce with this framework, we can govern encryption across our global footprint, ensuring that all types of storage are encrypted. We can even enforce that RDS master secrets are stored in our secrets management solution. We can govern external access across our environment, controlling which classes of instances can receive public IP addresses. Changes to AWS security groups can be reviewed programmatically for consistency with our architecture. We can enforce visibility across our global deployment, ensuring that logging is pervasive. Tagging standards are followed. Now, these are just a couple of examples of the 95 or so rules we enforce through automation today with an active product team that is building and curating these rules. But more than that, this is not just a product. This is an example of a way that we, as a community of security professionals, can approach innovation partner with DevOps teams, and transform the way we provide value. Now, if you want to learn more about Radar, the product team that built it is presenting it tomorrow afternoon in the ballroom upstairs. They're going to go into much more detail about the architecture and give additional examples. And I'll be there myself if you have questions for me. As you go through the conference the next 2 days, I hope you keep this transformation in mind, and not just a transformation about our technologies, but a transformation about us and our careers as security professionals. Look for new approaches that you can bring back to your organization. It's been a pleasure to share details of our cloud security journey with you today. I hope you have a great time here in our hometown and have a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. That was awesome. As a thought leader in that space, it's kind of fun to hear from people who are operating in really conservative industries, because it's an area where customers have found that they have an opportunity to really both disrupt the status quo, but also have to meet an incredible number of requirements from a regulatory perspective. To help meet requirements, it often helps to have individual little tips or techniques, and I'm going to switch to a much more tactical view of things at this point here. Some sustenance for the security engineers who are in the crowd here. The vast majority of security issues in the cloud really come from a lack of understanding, I think. A failure to dive deeply, and I get it. There are so many things to try out. There are so many new features and services that we're releasing all the time. I have a hard time keeping up with us, and I work here. It's a lot of fun. There are about 20 new services to discover every time we have a reInvent in November. So how are you going to fit those into your roadmap? But if you dive a bit deeper into our security portfolio, the gains can be consistent and considerable across the organization. So when you dive more deeply into things, you find that there are opportunities for you to build in security into your development pipeline. And I think that's an area where many people should focus if they don't already. For example, you can build something like AWS code pipelines with a container system and build in automated security testing as part of that work. Integrated security testing and security-centric release control is really critical to any organization that has to get things right every single time. And adding feedback loops help you correct common vulnerabilities more rapidly, but more importantly, teach your SDEs where they've made errors, your software development engineers, and help them prevent those errors in the future, since no tool will ever be perfect. You can also hear us talk all the time about scale at AWS. It's something that we think is really an impressive part of operating in the cloud, because every customer gets to take advantage of our scale from a protection perspective. Things like automation and templatizing wouldn't be possible without scale in many circumstances, and they're really best practices that most businesses should be taking advantage of, but they're particularly important where the risk profile for not implementing the right controls can be profound. Now, scale is something, when you compose systems together, that you can take advantage of the sort of synergies that they have with each other, using, for example, GuardDuty, Macie, Inspector, and Security Hub to investigate and respond to threats in a rapid fashion, and also help you understand what happened after an attack, and make sure that your response pipeline is properly built to respond to an issue and not just understand that there is a problem. And notice I said response pipeline. It is something that should be built on tooling that allows you to say, not only here is a problem, but here's the solution to the problem, and it can scale with my particular business. An example of that, by the way, was the GE told us that they replaced their entire intrusion detection, intrusion prevention infrastructure over a weekend when their incumbent vendor failed, and they used GuardDuty to make up the difference in what was going on. Now, of course, at the core of security is an encryption and identity management, and those are all anchored on certificates or identities. We heard that it was difficult to operate a root certificate authority. So to meet customer need, we released a new feature that allows you to create a certificate authority hierarchy with ACM private CA. You can create secure and highly available CAs, which are complicated things to operate, by the way, without building or maintaining your own on-premises infrastructure. This is something that not many people are really good at. It takes a lot of very precise decision making, and it's something that a lot of our customers had problems with, so really wanted some help here. This is getting rid of that undifferentiated heavy lifting that makes so many people unhappy. Now, of course, root CAs help you manage certificate chains, but there are also secrets out there that need management as well. Secrets like usernames and passwords for databases and things like that. And this is an area where featuring like AWS Lambda can help you, when mixed with Secrets Manager, automate compliance by rotating credentials across your applications as well as the infrastructure on which they operate. Now, we of course want you to have building blocks that help you secure the foundation of all of your services. But it's also important not to leave the front door open when you're doing this. APIs provide an awesome opportunity for enterprises to develop and integrate your applications together. However, it can be a challenge to build security measures into APIs in order to protect data and meet your compliance requirements. There are so many ways to get at this particular problem. We've built a lot of services to help you do that effectively. So resource policies, for example, let you create resource-based policies to allow or deny access to your APIs. There are standard IAM roles and policies that we curate that you can use to control who can get and create and manage your APIs, or tags that you can apply in IAM with IAM policies to control access to APIs. So there are a lot of different ways that you can look at control and enablement in your API infrastructure where we take on the heavy lifting for you so you don't have to. On the subject of APIs, Amazon API Gateway handles all of the tasks associated with accepting and processing up to hundreds of thousands of concurrent API calls so that you don't have to build an infrastructure to do that. That includes typical functions like traffic management and authorization, monitoring, version management, and that kind of thing. But you can also now create a CloudFront distribution and help secure your API gateway with AWS WAF, our Web Applications Firewall. The nice thing is this is really, really easy to do. You create a regional API, you create a CloudFront distribution, you set up WAF and create a web ACL, access control list, that's appropriate for your particular workload, and you attach the WAF web ACL to the CloudFront distribution. Done. Which is really much simpler than doing things the old way. On the subject of code, one of the things that we've invested in quite a bit is building up formal reasoning about the way infrastructures operate. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the problem we're trying to attack here is in a complex infrastructure, the problem becomes this combinatorial explosion, where if I want to say, can this particular machine talk to the internet? Or is this policy more or less expressive or permissive than this policy? It's very difficult to do. So we built a set of tools that help use math to understand whether your policies are more permissive or less permissive than a previous policy, or whether one component of your infrastructure can talk to the internet and it never should be able to, or whether your S3 buckets are locked down consistently with your particular priorities and policies. One of the things I'm most proud about, though, is Amazon GuardDuty. GuardDuty is something we launched at reInvent last year. We've seen absolutely crazy progress in this space. It has been one of the most rapidly adopted services in AWS history. We've also not slowed down at all in building up the capabilities of GuardDuty. We've increased detections by 86% since launch, while also reducing the effective cost to customers by 28%. Some of our largest customers have seen their bills for GuardDuty drop by up to 80%, 80%, because of our cost reduction optimizations that we've undertaken here. Some new detections, by the way, that we've launched recently include crypto mining, outbound denial of service attacks, which often indicate that your machines have been compromised by a botnet, or instances using your credentials to run intrusion tools. Lastly, we have also added detections for use of root credentials. That's something, by the way, that please don't do. Use IAM credentials that are minimally scoped to the roles that they need to undertake. If you're a security practitioner and you're looking to gain insight around specific tools and services, the deep dive track is going to be for you. As you see on screen, a few of the callouts here are denial of service detection, security analytics, and permissions management. Now then, when we think about operating in a highly regulated industry, I think a customer and partner like Capital One comes immediately to mind. We first heard about their cloud adoption at reInvent in 2015. And now to speak to the progress they've made on getting out of their data centers, I'd like to welcome to the stage their CISO, Michael Johnson.
Thank you, Steve. I'd also like to thank Andy and the rest of AWS for inviting Capital One to be part of the first Inforce conference. Given the strategic relationship between Capital One and AWS, it's a pleasure to be here. Let me tell you a little bit about Capital One. At Capital One, we dare to dream, disrupt, and deliver a better way. Our goal is to bring ingenuity, simplicity, and humanity to the industry that is most ripe for change, that is banking. Capital One is a 25-year-old founder-led company, the nation's largest direct bank, and the third largest credit card issuer in the United States with more than 70 million customers. And importantly, Capital One just this year opened a tech center here in Boston. If you think about the bank of the future, there's really two parts to it. On one side, there's the innovation skills of a tech company. On the other, the risk management skills of a bank, enabling proactive, personalized customer experiences that transform people's relationship with money to help people live their best lives. Enabling and safeguarding the bank of the future requires a comprehensive transformation, talent, technology infrastructure, and how we work. And now is an amazing time to be a technology and a cyber professional. We're at the height of the digital transformation, revolutionizing every aspect of human life, with multiple mutually reinforcing paradigm shifts, including platforming. Cyber is evolving from a trade craft to a science, and cyber professionals are defining the future of business. When our CIO, Rob Alexander, addressed reInvent back in 2015, we were just beginning our cloud journey. Even then, AWS was a key partner of ours, but that relationship has only continued to grow, allowing us to bring award-winning capabilities to market faster while safeguarding our customers and our businesses. We have embraced the public cloud, and we are well on our way to migrating all of our applications and all of our data to the cloud. We are now considered one of the most cloud-forward companies in the world, and we expect to completely exit our data centers by the end of 2020. We're innovating much faster, and our engineers are loving it. Our tech transformation is enabling how we rapidly deliver award-winning and innovative solutions to our customers by not worrying about the underlying infrastructure. But importantly, given the context of this conference, now let's look under the hood and see how we're safeguarding our customers. Most important to us is the confidentiality, the integrity, and the availability of our data in the cloud. Cloud-native companies must take a multi-layered approach to security, leveraging internally developed tools like the Capital One developed open-source cloud custodian, and leveraging AWS safeguarding tools like GuardDuty, Macie, and AWS Shield. And importantly, while Capital One is always fully accountable for our customers' data, by leveraging AWS expertise to secure the cloud, that allows us to focus resources on security of what's in the cloud and the innovation we need to deliver. And so, as I like to say, together, this makes us measurably safer in the cloud by reducing the attack surface, constant hardware refreshes, speed of deployment and automated patching, dynamic attack surface with shorter-lived resources and frequent reprovisioning, spread out attack surface with commingled data across multiple data storage arrays, seamlessly integrating monitoring across all of our services and applications, including real-time visibility into resources, configurations, and our control structures, speed of detection or remediation of issues, earlier detection of threats, and improved data protection, including 11 nines of data durability, fine-grained access control, multi-region availability, and forced data encryption. And this ensures that the regulatory requirements are met through in-depth service assessments of every service. Speed in the cloud also allows us to be faster at safeguarding against new and emerging threats. And the best example of this that we all had to deal with was in early 2018 when Spectre Meltdown was identified. We knew that we had to replace our entire infrastructure footprint and patch all of our services, both in the cloud and on-prem. Our centralized image management team worked with OS vendors to receive patches, validate and integrate those into gold image standards that we could deploy across our environment. And by decentralizing the maintenance, we were able to leverage thousands of software engineers across our company to move the applications to those new hosts. We were able to do that within our on-prem and our data centers that still exist, measured in multiple days. We were able to do that in our cloud instances, measured in hours. We're also innovating heavily in the cloud. An example of this is the Capital One developed Critical Stack, the secure container orchestration platform for the enterprise. Critical Stack allows customers to more easily leverage secure containerization by shifting the security boundary and managing Kubernetes easily, providing improved deployment density, moving past the one workload per machine model, enforcing security controls with simple installation while retaining full management of all resources. But it always comes back to talent. As our founder and CEO, Rich Fairbanks, says, recruit great people and give them the opportunity to be great. We've hired thousands of engineers and built an at-scale engineering organization. We have deeply embedded software engineers, designers, data scientists, and cyber professionals within the business. And we have a real presence now here in Boston with 9 Capital One cafes and a new tech center we're forming and opening on MIT's campus in 2021. Importantly, at Capital One, we're defining the future of how both cyber enables and safeguards a dynamic, mission-critical, and highly regulated business. And we're doing this with AWS to deliver the bank of the future. We invite you to join Capital One, where we're working to change banking for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Really great stuff. It's really instructive to see how you can take a giant multinational organization like that and actually spin it and go in a whole new direction relatively quickly and effectively. It's just a few short years since they started, and they've made amazing progress doing it. Now, a quote here from Abraham Lincoln helps us frame up where I think we're headed next, and we're all going to get there by creating it together in a lot of ways. We give you the tools, but you really drive what those tools are. The path forward, of course, always includes our partners who are helping us create the future. Make sure that you visit them in the expo hall today. 3 partners have significant launches that I wanted to call out this year. First up, Symantec has launched Cloud Workload Protection, which works closely with Amazon GuardDuty to automatically detect threats and infrastructure misconfigurations in AWS and recommend necessary changes and automate the workflow to remediate those gaps. And that last piece, I think, is really key. Close the gap with automation. Next up, Palo Alto Networks is announcing the integration of a new security scanning API service with code pipeline integration that integrates security checks early in software development lifecycle. These API services are part of their newly announced Prisma public cloud suite of security offerings. And lastly, of course, McAfee's cloud division is announcing a product concept that they call Shift Left, using CloudFormation templates in conjunction with McAfee's mVision Cloud to identify configuration and compliance issues, preemptively protecting companies that use it then from accidental misconfigs. They monitor customer environments for configuration changes downstream to help you continuously protect your infrastructure. Now, compliance and security walk hand in hand if you're doing it properly. It's an area where, in order to support the pace of innovation that we've got, we have to support the innovation pace in our audit world as well. We'll move away from the very traditional world of audit by paper, when an audit was measured by how many pounds of dead trees that you had to determine sufficiency. And instead, we're going to be seeing a move towards automation in the audit process. We want to move to a world where important workloads are continuously audited, where there is no time frame during which a material difference or change can creep forward, and we have to do that through automation. Customers are also asking their third-party auditors don't bring in a spreadsheet when you do an audit of us. Query our security controls via an API and detect changes using a dashboard. We think that's an area that the industry is going right now, and we can help move them with better tooling in that space. Now, if we're looking towards the future, let's baseline sort of a very traditional application process for a complex issue, which is a forensic examination of money laundering or anti-money laundering. The way it used to work was that people monitored transactions using maybe a rule-based system, and then they wrote that material down and they passed it off to a set of investigators, who then, of course, laboriously paged through the paperwork that they got, data review, et cetera. And if they find something interesting, then they maybe go out and look for some interesting data from a third party to help corroborate something. And of course, then finally at the end of this long, long process, they might file a suspicious activity report. You'll note that this is kind of analogous to what happens with a computer security investigation. It's a lot about digging out the data and finding something out of all that mush that's of interest. So where does a process like anti-money laundering end up in the machine learning world? Well, what we're seeing financial services institutions do now is use data lakes to put that, of course, pool of data into that you had previously. Then they're using Amazon SageMaker to quickly build, train, and deploy machine learning models at scale. And all of that automation removes that whole first series of actions that the anti-money laundering staff had to undertake. The interesting part about it is, because machines do exactly what they're told, it not only removes a lot of the delay and the lag, but it also removes a lot of the errors that happen when humans are involved in processes. The same thing should be true in your security response processes. Use the ML engines that are out there to develop models of the behavior of your applications and your services. Define what normalcy is and identify situations that are abnormal. Use machines to do it so that your highest value asset, your human security professionals, can focus on what's important, which is human understanding of complex issues. This is, by the way, how guard duty takes actions on your behalf. We collect statistical norms about how your machines perform, who they talk to over what period of time, with what volume and periodicity. And we identify situations where they don't behave like each other or like they normally do. And we'll raise you an alert saying, perhaps this particular machine has never talked to a Bitcoin mining hub before, and now it is. That's probably not a good thing, and you might want to take a look at it and do something about it. And of course, if you add in automations from our partners, you can remediate that problem, or you can use AWS Lambda to do the same thing. People are using ML in real life as well. This is a great example to look at, by the way. So Celgene uses Apache MXNet on Amazon SageMaker to virtually analyze biological impact of potential drugs. A model that used to take about 2 months to train, by the way, can now be trained in about 4 hours, which is a heck of a differentiator for them. If the average commercial drug costs more than $2.5 billion to bring to market, it takes about 10 years. Getting to market quickly is critical not only to the financial success of organizations, but also realistically to the patients who depend on that new medication. In the past, when you were looking at this kind of drug development, researchers would rely on imperfect image processing algorithms to analyze cancer cells, and then they'd correct them by hand when they found errors. With tens of thousands of cells, this of course required a huge expenditure of time and effort. Now using SageMaker and MXNet deep learning frameworks, Celgene can do this kind of critical toxicology prediction virtually, which means it comes to market more quickly, less expensively, but also without putting live patients at risk. Now, of course, you cannot protect what you don't see. And the easier it is to see what happens in your network, the easier it is to secure it. Security tools especially, typically rely on an agent or being a bump in the wire, something that interposes your traffic. They maybe then decrypt the traffic that they get, they monitor it for compliance, detect threats, perhaps perform forensics. But a lot of our customers have not tens or hundreds, but thousands of virtual private clouds. Most companies that are out there have between 20 and 40 security tools that they're using, which require some form of collection process. Deploying an agent or a collector for each tool is a recipe not only for inefficiency, but also for an outage or a vulnerability in your infrastructure. So we decided to solve that. We're happy to announce that we have traffic mirroring available for virtual private cloud today, and traffic mirroring forwards traffic natively from your VPCs to tools of your choice without an agent or a bump in the wire, and more importantly, without performance impact to your infrastructure. 19 partners already support traffic mirroring on launch, including all the leaders in the security space. They're available in the marketplace today if you want to experiment with them. And we know that other partners will be adopting quickly. Speaking of service launches, we're very proud to announce that one of my own team's services is generally available today. With Security Hub, you now have a single place that aggregates, organizes, and prioritizes your security alerts, your findings, from multiple AWS services like GuardDuty or Inspector or Amazon Macie, as well as from AWS partner solutions. Your findings are visually summarized for you on an integrated dashboard with actionable graphs and tables that help you focus your investigative efforts in the right place at the right time. Of course, no security story is complete without our partners. We've got 25 different partner integrations with Security Hub that are available today. That's across 23 different partners. But the point here is that you get not only alerting, but the actionable movement towards a secure environment after the alert occurs if you use a partner integration. Taking action is always more important. The partners listed on the slide here have built the integrations already that allow our customers to take action on their security and their compliance findings, such as sending them to tickets or a chatbot, an on-call management system, or an orchestration platform. This, of course, helps you not only reduce the time to resolve issues, but also prevents compliance failures from creeping up in your environment down the road. Please make sure to attend Eli Khan's session listed on the right-hand side of the screen there. He'll provide a deeper dive into the various customer use cases associated with Security Hub. Switching gears a little bit, we've been talking a lot about the virtual world, but one of the things I'm responsible for in our organization is our physical data center security as well. And we decided that we were going to take on the physical world using AWS tools. As you can imagine, the physical world is something that we want to understand what's going on. And to do that, we've got literally many tens of thousands of video cameras across our data centers around the world. The old way of doing that was that we would collect all that information in NVRs, which were local to a data center. If we needed to do any kind of analysis on it, we had to export the video and move it to a new system, and keeping them updated was terrible and took a lot of effort, and oh, by the way, they cost a ton. So we got tired of that, and we built an application that we use in-house that uses Kinesis video streams for streaming video. So all of our cameras stream video directly to Kinesis. All the video is stored on the cloud. We use S3 for long-term storage of the video. The playback is at 4K resolutions at 30 frames a second, so it's awesome clarity. But more importantly, this allows us to scale our security operations with the business without having to build more physical NVR boxes, and my team is no longer responsible for the availability of those physical NVRs. We can meet all the compliance requirements we have to with this service, and most importantly, it allows us to apply new techniques easily to analyze that video, like using recognition to understand who's in a particular facility at a particular point in time. Serverless is another thing that's really on top of people's minds. Our serverless technologies with AWS Lambda let you run code without provisioning or maintaining or managing servers. You can run code for virtually any type of application or back-end service, all with zero administration. As Abby mentioned, by the way, security is one of the key strengths of serverless because customers have a lot less that they have to pay attention to. Unless your passion is maintaining an operating system or a container management platform, it's really not where you want to spend your development effort and time. So serverless allows you to depend on us to do all the underpinning heavy work. And as Abby said, AWS Lambda is now running on a Firecracker, which not only improves the latency of creating new VM containers, but it also strengthens the virtualization barriers between functions. If you've been paying attention to the security of containers, you'll know that our decision to use virtual machines or VMs, even micro VMs, as the security boundary for containers was a good one. It turns out the container management systems were never really designed for multi-tenant security, and as a result, there are a lot of opportunities for improvement there. Momentum with Lambda, of course, continues to grow. With only 3 years in the market, we see trillions of executions every single month and have hundreds of thousands of active customers every month using AWS Lambda. For a long time, it's not true anymore. My security team was the largest consumer of Lambda in the world because we use it to react to every alarm that we get on our infrastructure. And with an infrastructure our size, of course, you see lots of people poking at you. But Lambda allows us to scale our security team to the point where we still only have one on-call security engineer who's babysitting the automation. And that, I think, is the power of using serverless architectures effectively. We see a tremendous amount of growth in the application of machine learning and artificial intelligence. Historically, security has been a really binary, rules-based system in which things are either okay or they're very not okay. And we've built complex systems to define what okay is based on a number of criteria. Right now, I think we're in a world where we can build strong defenses against known threats, but we can build effective hedging strategies to intercept things that we think are okay versus risky. We've lacked the ability, however, to apply human-level intelligence to threat detection and remediation. And today, we're just starting to see that change. I think we're in the early stages of a world where machine learning and artificial intelligence become a foundational and indispensable part of an effective security perimeter. All right, this is me getting up on my high horse here, so I'll preface this with that. But I am not a fan of DevSecOps. We want security embedded in the dev process. I think our industry, and your applause indicates this, thought this was a catchy term. Let's throw some security in the middle of this dev thingy. The real goal, however, is that security and development are embedded throughout your operations process. They have to be there at every stage of development. There is no scenario that I can envision where wouldn't security be nice to put in here should be a mantra that you're okay with in your infrastructure. We're always working with things of value here, whether it's intellectual property, your corporate reputation, people's personally identifiable information, credit card data. None of this leads any sane person to think that security should happen eventually. DevSecOps just has to be the way ops happen. Three takeaways I'd like to give you for this discussion, things you can take home. Number one, we have to be at the point where security is not scary. Let's dial down the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, folks. We have to focus on solutions because that moves everybody forward, makes us all more successful. Number two, there are real tactical things you can do right now to make yourself safer and real strategic decisions you can take to make yourself more secure going forward. For the first thing, let's look at the docs. There is now a security section being built out for every single AWS services, not just the security services. It gives you best practices, things you can implement immediately to help you be more secure. On the strategic side, as we bring together our makers and our builders, emphasize that security is the top priority for everybody across your industry. Without customer trust, it's impossible to operate in the digital space, no matter who you are. For CISOs, for the VPs in the audience, the directors, the CTOs, make a commitment today that security is critical to the function of your business. Andy Jassy says it on stage at every single reInvent. Security is job zero for AWS. For anybody who operates a digital business, you should be thinking the same way. I report every single week to our CEO, Andy, on the critical security issues that face our customers because he cares deeply about the problem. If your management chain is not thinking the same way, find a way to encourage them to become interested in it because if you get ahead of the problem, it's so much better than having to catch up when something bad goes wrong. My team interacts with every portion of our business every single day, and this should be the same for you as well. Eric Brandwein will be handling the leadership session for the Pioneering and Security track today. He's got a lot of fun topics to talk about, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but let's just say that yes, The Oregon Trail on a Mac SE30 does come up in his talk, so he'll keep you entertained. But if you'd like more encryption guidance, check out SEP402. It's actually a really cool way to get real direct knowledge about how you should implement encryption practically in an organization. But I think the most fun session that's going to be available today, at least from my perspective here, is the last one that's listed. I'm always fascinated with how organizational events like this and reInvent happen behind the scenes. Now, what are all the pieces that go together to make this a seamless event for our customers and make it a safe event for everybody? So we actually decided to give you a behind-the-scenes tour and the event engineering at scale. We'll talk about how we build the Wi-Fi infrastructure that you all use today, as well as the security systems that help keep you safe. So take a look at that. If you're an international customer, we may just be coming to a location near you. We're launching a 10-city global security roadshow in August, with the primary objective being educating our customers around the world on security and compliance with very hands-on content delivered by local security experts in AWS. These are smaller events. There's no charge. They'll be happening in places like Sydney, Tokyo, Tel Aviv, and more. We'll have more of that available, by the way, on our AWS security blog, which I encourage you to take a look at. It feels like the right time to tell you this is not a one-time thing. We hope to see you next year at AWS Reinforce. It's going to be in Houston, Texas on June 16th and 17th of 2020. And according to all the people that I met in Texas, the security event will even be bigger there because everything's bigger in Texas. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your attention today. I hope you enjoy the afternoon. Thank you for coming.